All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Around the Block. I'm here with a new guest, Noobasaurus.
Yo.
Welcome to the show. I hope you're ready for a bit of a talk about Redstone and Minecraft in general.
Yeah, this will be interesting. I have no idea what we're going to get into, but we'll take it as it comes. I guess we'll play it by ear.
I just want to start off by saying I did find your channel pretty recently. I mean, you've been doing YouTube for quite a long time, but I found your channel through the World Tour video you did on the rail line, which you posted a couple weeks ago. And I thought that was a great video. It was a very interesting way to approach Minecraft, and I want to see how you kind of came across that whole idea.
Yeah, so I think the idea originally sort of manifested playing on a server with some friends. I want to say maybe 2 or 3 years ago, because we had a server. It was pretty spread out, and I thought it'd be kind of cool to try and make a rail network, to connect everything there. And a lot, excuse me, a lot of the inspiration for, or I guess the reason why I wanted to do that was because around the time I was getting big into Factorio, more specifically block control and rail control and things like that. And I thought it was rather clever how you could synchronize all of these different trains going in all these different directions simply by setting up blocks appropriately and giving trains a method of traversing the network, right? So the first iteration of the project was on that server, and it was basically to try and get everybody connected in a way where they could all simultaneously use the network. That that failed horrendously. I went pretty much nowhere with that project. And so when the server disbanded, that project kind of sat in the corner collecting cobwebs. And then fast forward to my own world, and I'm sitting here wanting to play some Minecraft, thinking, getting around my world with the Nether network, it's not very fun. I don't know if you've ever done any serious work traveling via the Nether.
Oh
At
yeah,
all.
yeah.
Yeah,
I've
it's
worked on some tunnels here and there just to make it easier, but I can see where you're coming from.
yeah, but even the tunnels, it's like setting those up. I don't know what it is about them. It's just not fun. And so it was around that time that I was thinking, and I even explained this in the video. It's like, okay, well, to make things easier, maybe I'll set up a rail network in the Nether. But then I was like, wait, why am I doing it in the Nether? I can just do it in the overworld. And what I ended up finding was it's actually a lot more enjoyable that way. I mean, it's a slow process to get it set up. You have to collect a lot of materials. You have to travel a very long distance, and you have to lay down all the track and all this stuff. But once it's set up, the ride is actually pretty relaxing. It's actually really fun, and it actually makes it fun to travel around the world. So all of a sudden, I'm finding myself getting more interested in projects and more interested in setting up these logistic systems. And yeah,
Yeah, I think what fascinated me most is that you decided to use a rail network compared to like just using an elytra or even horses, since you don't really see that a lot nowadays.
yeah, that was one of the comments that I got on that video, and I do want to say just on the side there, I was not expecting that video to get as big as it
Yeah.
did. I was expecting maybe a few hundred views, and yeah, that came out of nowhere. So, but yes, I did get a lot of comments of people sitting here saying, well, why don't you use, ice highways and boats? Why don't you, set up something like this in the Nether? Why don't you use Elytra? I think somebody at one point actually just said that this was just a compensation for not having enough skill to get Elytras, which I guess at the time was kind of true. I didn't have Elytras at the time, but now I've got 3 of them, and I still don't use them. Um, but the main advantages, the reason why I primarily stuck with that one is, again, it's fun, it's relaxing, it's enjoyable to travel through my world. But 2 is just the logistical advantages that I mentioned in the video. You can't really carry all that much in terms of materials when you're flying with an elytra. You certainly can't bring, entities.
So, kind of taking a step back,
Mhm.
if you don't mind, kind of like introducing who you are on YouTube. Like,
Well, I have to figure that out myself, don't I?
Yeah. Like what kind
Yes.
of videos do you post? And I guess that's just kind of the question in itself.
So when I started my channel 10 years ago, it was originally map making. Then it transitioned to Let's Plays, and then it transitioned to computational Redstone. And I stuck with that for a little while. I think anybody who knows, because that was the majority of my channel growth. Anybody who knows me on YouTube primarily knows me as that computational Redstone guy. So that was my primary identity. And yeah, I was fine with that for a while. And then what ended up happening is about a few years ago, I ended up just getting burnt out. And so I kind of just took a step back and examined it. It was like, okay, what do I really want to do here? Because the computational Redstone part of my channel, it stopped being fun, you know. And
I look, this is coming from somebody who doesn't know nearly as much Redstone as you do. I did look through your channel just to see, um, just to kind of like research what I should ask you about. And Redstone is definitely something that it's one of your strengths.
yeah,
So you probably have a background in like, I guess like computer technology, right? Because it doesn't just start one day like, oh, I'm building computers in Minecraft.
no, you're definitely right. This whole process is a story in the making, probably for the last, gosh, 15, 20 years maybe. um, but yeah, if we want to fast forward a little bit, the highest level of education I got is a 2-year associates in electronics technology, and that's where they introduced me to microcontrollers and microprocessors. And it was from there that I actually started to explore computer architectures and things like that. And Redstone just so happened to be a convenient medium on which to practice that sort of stuff. So
So how did you find Minecraft in the first place? I know you kind of talked about this in your video, but just for
yeah,
people that
yeah.
haven't seen it.
Um, it was literally just friends sitting in high school in the cafeteria. Some friends of mine pull out their laptop one day and they're like, "Hey, check out what I'm building." And I take a look at them and I see, you know, this is just before the Endermen were introduced, so somewhere in the beta. All I saw were like piers of oak wood planks and fences that pillared up and had a glowstone hanging over it, and it looked really, really minimal by today's standards, but it looked really, really fun. And again, as I said in the Rail Tour video, that just so happened to line up with another project, another interest of mine, which was the Plastic Beach. So it just kind of worked out like that.
Yeah, that was such an interesting story. I mean, just taking inspirations from other things and trying to replicate it in the game, I think is something that everybody does every once in a while.
Yeah, and it is rewarding. It's very, very much so fun. I honestly couldn't imagine Minecraft being fun any other way. I'm sure maybe some people will have a counter argument, but really, I mean, this is a sandbox game. You do you do what you want to do basically, and if you find that replicating fictional islands from a fictional music group is fun, there you go.
Do you actually have any progress so far on that project? I know that's like one of the main goals in your main world right now.
At this point, the first major step to that project will probably be finding a good spot to actually build it. Because I don't know if you're familiar with the Plastic Beach at all.
I have listened to a couple songs off the album, and I am familiar with the Gorillas.
Yeah, but you're aware of like the island itself, how it's kind
Yeah,
of
yeah,
laid
yeah.
out. It's got that big underwater structure of massive garbage and a small underwater glass room kind of deal, deep underwater. When I built that first model in creative, or I guess technically it's the third, I wanted to try and maintain the scale of it. So the underwater portion it goes pretty far down. And so if I'm going to find a location in the world, I'm going to have to probably find a deep ocean. And even then, it's going to be a lot of work to actually extend the ocean floor deeper down to make room for it. So it's going to be a big project, but it's all in due time.
Gotcha. So going back to Redstone, do you think you have a project which you like consider like the most complex thing you've ever done or
Most
attempted?
complex.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can definitely say there have been some attempts at complex things. Most recent one was actually the Fat Stacks project, and to the same degree, I guess the Speedy Computer project, because both of those, and I know I'm going to be using words that you probably aren't going to understand, but
Uh,
both of those are a pipelined computer. More specifically, they're a complex instruction pipeline computer. So there's a lot of what's the word? Somebody actually put it very, very elegantly. They have an instruction or microcode preprocessor at the front of the pipeline. And on paper, that sounds simple. The instructions go in, microcodes come out, they get fed through a pipeline. But synchronizing everything and keeping everything synchronized, I find it is actually a bit of a challenge. At this point, I haven't really been working on it because of that challenge, but I'm not too concerned about abandoning that project. Eventually, I'll come back to it with more knowledge, more understanding, and be able to actually finish it. But for now, it's just kind of sitting there.
I'm sure there's a bunch of people that are listening that are like, "Oh, okay, wow, that sounds very difficult," but just listening, I can only imagine.
This is a lot. Like I said, this is something that I didn't learn all of this at once. I put my playlist together to try and help those who might want to try and learn this a little faster. But something like this was something that I slowly discovered and learned about over the course of years. So it's perfectly fine if you don't understand.
For people that are just starting out with Redstone, do you have any recommendations on what they could do to learn it quicker?
There seems to be three categories of people when it comes to Redstone. There's the people who don't know and don't care. There's the people who they don't know but they do care and they do what they can to learn. And then there's the people in the middle who don't know, want to learn, but don't know how. And I think that's I'm not sure where I'm going with this, but I think that's like where a lot of the struggle tends to focus. That's kind of what like everybody caters to the people who don't know but want to learn. I don't think anybody really knows how to cater to the people who don't know and don't know how to learn. And I don't think there's a one size fits all solution. I can make my own recommendations based on how I'm wired, which is basically give yourself a project. Case in point, I mean, the purpose of Redstone is to add some level of automation. I mean, it's literally a tool that the game provides that allows you to automate things. So I would say if you really wanted to learn, I guess that would be what I would say is give yourself some context, because abstract concepts don't stick nearly as well as something that you can see and feel and gain intuition for. I think that's also why a lot of people might struggle with math, is just because it's too detached from reality. There's no way that they can actually play with any of these ideas. And it might also be why that sort of things, I tend to gravitate towards those things, because along with electronics, I also did a lot of programming. And originally when I started programming, it was in the context of building games. And so a lot of like abstract math concepts I could actually apply to something like a game engine. How do I make a 2D character jump up and fall down? How do I apply gravity and physics and all these things? So a lot of that stuff was able to stick with me because I had something to give it context, if that makes sense.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So
And
I don't know if you want to
so
get into that. You have experience like making games.
not a lot. These days, I mostly just program tools to help with tasks that I find to be taking up too much of my time. But as far as making games are concerned, the most actually, that might not be a bad subject to bring up. The most experience I've had with making games is recreating other games using command blocks. Again, I mentioned my earlier videos on the channel was map making. My first video was a build log on a game I called Spanfuder Der Toten that was basically just a reimagining of Kino Der Toten from Black Ops 1 Zombies. So that was literally just me wanting to recreate that game in Minecraft. And as a result of that, it actually gave me, again, context for learning command blocks and different Redstone systems and things like that. I actually learned a lot about Redstone building that map. I think prior to that, I tried learning Redstone by like building the individual components that I learned about in digital electronics, and while that helped me to learn the ins and outs of the Redstone system, it didn't really help with actually figuring out how to build complex systems. The game did, because I had to figure out, like, I wanted a mystery box that could roam about the map. Okay, how do I do that? I need a centralized randomizer that can activate or deactivate different mystery boxes. Each one of those needs to have some kind of a distribution and shuffling system to distribute weapons and things like that. So if you give yourself a project, it definitely helps because it gives you the context needed to kind of allow these sort of concepts to stick. But even that, there does come a trap with that, right? And that is if the project is beyond your scope and there's just too much to learn and it's not being developed fast enough, it can be discouraging, I guess is the word I'm looking for.
Oh, totally, totally.
Yeah.
And
So
going back before I forget, sorry to cut you off, but
no, it's fine.
giving yourself a project that it forces you to learn new things is definitely the best way to learn new things. I just thinking for myself, I mean, this is not anything nearly as complex as stuff that you work on, but I was making like a sugarcane farm. This is like a couple years ago, and it forced me to learn how to use observers and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then now I know like how that kind of stuff can be used to make other farms as well.
Yeah, and it's that incremental acquisition of new information that allows you to get better slowly. It doesn't have to be fast, and I think that's the mistake that a lot of people make. And I know that's definitely something I made because I grew up in the American education system where you had to turn your assignments in on time. So there definitely is like this sense that you have to learn quickly. You have to gather all this information. You don't have to. You can take things slow. You can do things as you see the necessity for it. You can learn a little bit here, a little bit there, and over years it slowly accumulates. You may not be as fast as other people when it comes to acquiring new information, but that's fine. There's no reason why you have to learn things faster. And the more I explore these sorts of things, the more I kind of observe myself in these sort of situations trying to learn something new, the more I'm actually learning that sort of stuff. The more I'm realizing that like a lot of this really is just for your own fun. So if you're not having fun, there's not much point in it.
Do you think there could be any new blocks that could be added which would enhance Redstone?
Yeah. Whether or not they'll actually be added, that's another question, but that's a different topic, I guess. And this one I've kind of been on the fence about, because on the one hand I could see how it could be useful. On the other hand, I know that there are other workarounds. One of these is actually a non-inverting redstone torch. I thought that something like that would actually be really, really helpful in creating compact ROMs. Again, it's probably not something you're going to know, but in order to actually create a decoder, you need to be able to not only detect when a signal is on, but also detect when it's off. And to do that, you have to invert the signal and send 2 lines down. It makes the decoder size twice as big as it really ought to be. And I've always thought that adding non-inverting torches might actually help with that. The other thought that I had more recently, just seeing the new copper bulbs, they've introduced a nice 1-block T flip-flop or toggle flip-flop. And I've looked at that and I said, why don't we have a 1-block D flip-flop solution? I know we have locked repeaters, and those work tremendously for vertical redstone, but there are other applications that I can think of where a 1-block D flip-flop would actually be really nice.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting, like, hearing from a perspective where a lot of your knowledge comes from outside of Minecraft Redstone. You know a lot more about like real life computers and how that kind of stuff works. So even though it doesn't apply to me, I think hearing about what you would add to Minecraft is pretty interesting because I'm sure there's a lot of Redstone people out there as well that would really agree with that and like, oh yeah, that's what we need. And like
Yeah,
hoping that Mojang adds like what you were saying earlier with the that torch.
yeah, the non-inverting redstone torch. That
Yeah.
I think, yeah, there definitely could be a lot of components that could be added to Minecraft that would make things easier or better or open up new possibilities. But at the same time, going over the comments that I received with the Rail Network video, one of the things that somebody pointed out was the simplicity of some things. I don't want to say they force you to be creative, but I guess they allow you to sort of be a little bit more imaginative instead of having a prepackaged solution in a 1 or 2 block form. It sort of forces you to work within the constraints of what you've got and overcome them, which I think that's a valid argument. So if things were to be added to Minecraft, more than likely they would have to be simple. You know, nothing too terribly groundbreaking or super complex, just something that adds a very, very simple mechanic, like comparators when they were added back in I think it was the Redstone update 1.5, was it?
Yeah, somewhere way back. They've been in the game for a while too.
They have been, but that was something simple. It was a basic component. I know a lot of people say that they're complex. They're really not. It's, you're either comparing or subtracting one of the two, but it's a very, very simple component that adds a whole lot of new possibilities, which I think, having said that, might just contradict what I said.
Well, I
I
think
don't,
adding stuff like that would be a good thing because if even if it's something that might be more complex for the average player, it opens up possibilities for the future of the game and what can possibly be done.
yeah, yeah. At the same time, though, a lot of people were saying in the comments in the Rail Network video that elytras, ice highways, things like this, they are certainly convenient, but they make the game a little bit too fast, right? It speeds the game up so you don't actually have time to just enjoy it. I don't know if that's necessarily the argument I'd go with, but I think there is some validity to that. Having said that, I actually do enjoy just sitting in a minecart and traveling at 8 meters per second as opposed to, wearing a pair of elytras traveling at, what is it, 25, 30 meters per second, something like that.
Yeah.
So with every new redstone component you add, yes, you do get more possibilities and more mechanics and more inventions that open up. But at the same time, you also speed up the game, if that makes sense.
So, going back to your world, you do have the Plastic Beach project, but do you have anything planned after that that you would like
Yes.
to attempt?
I have a, I want to say semi-complete, although at this point in time, I'm looking at actually redoing it because I want to get the scale a little different. But I have a semi-complete recreation of Alcatraz Island at a 1-to-1 scale.
Oh, that's sick. That's awesome.
Yeah. And I spent many hours researching little details, trying to get everything not only visually accurate, but also historically accurate. Like, a lot of people, when they build, recreations of Alcatraz, they focus on the new stuff, the cell house, the apartments, all that stuff. I was more focused on the stuff buried under those buildings that was built during the Civil War era.
Wow, that's I've thought about doing like recreations of stuff in real life in Minecraft. I mean, actually, I guess I have in creative mode. I've attempted to rebuild the Chrysler building and stuff like that. But a
Yeah.
project at that scale is pretty insane, especially 1-for-1 scale. It's Alcatraz is huge.
Alcatraz is very huge, and I didn't realize just how big it was until I started building it out. And the only way you can really experience it in its full glory is when you have like a mod like I have, like the Distance Horizons mod. Building it the first time around, I didn't have that, so I could only ever really appreciate bits and pieces of it at a time. And when I got the Distant Horizons mod, the first thing I did was loaded up that world with my replica in it just to see it all. It was great.
Well, if you ever get to that point where you're good with calling it finished, I would really like to see that video when you tour it. That would be
Yeah,
that'd be awesome.
I think I toured the incomplete model during one of my live streams, but yeah, I could definitely post a video on that at some point. At this point, the biggest hiccup though is, like I said, I want to rescale it because the alignment that I was having inside the cell house, I wasn't super happy with it. And I'm gonna get super geeky into this for just a second here, but there is a pattern in the construct of the cell house. With a few exceptions, everything operates on a pretty consistent grid. And when replicating it on a 1-to-1 scale, I couldn't replicate that grid system inside the cell house because things were rounded up and rounded down to a 1 meter resolution. You know, cells that were 5 feet wide, you don't obviously don't have 5 foot measurements or 5 foot increments in Minecraft. You have 1 meter.
Right.
Yeah. So things either had to be moved up a little bit or down a little bit. And so what I found is if I increase the scale of the cell house by about 5%, I can actually get that resolution to a nice sweet spot where I can get everything lined up very, very close to where it's supposed to be. So what I'm looking at now is actually just rescaling the whole island, just making it just a little bit bigger than it actually is supposed to be, just to try and get a little bit more detail, which is, it's a nice idea on paper, but it does mean I have to rebuild everything.
Yeah, that's where.
Yeah.
That reminds me of I don't know if you saw the Build the World project that they're doing,
Yes.
where they're recreating like pretty much the whole world in Minecraft.
Yeah.
Where if somebody has actually attempted Alcatraz before, which there probably has been at least one person, you could probably get
Oh,
some
absolutely.
help just checking that out and seeing the dimensions and how they do it.
I could definitely do that. My only, I don't want to say concern. Well, I guess it is kind of a concern. Obviously, Build the Earth is trying to be geographically accurate. And I don't know if you've seen their mapping system where they take world coordinates and translate it into Minecraft coordinates.
I did. I watched that video like a long time ago.
Yeah.
I'm trying to refresh my memory on that.
Well, they basically needed a projection algorithm that could take the spherical world and flatten it to a Minecraft world, right?
Yeah.
That's basically what it came down to. And a lot of things are, a lot of cities are arranged in a grid that's orthogonally aligned. North facing streets face due north. But because of that projection algorithm, those angles kind of shift, right? So you could be building a building or a street that's supposed to be going directly due north-south, but it's kind of going off at an angle. So there's a lot of buildings that are built at odd angles and things like that, which they look great from a distance, but get up close and it's kind of not great. And that's just the stuff that's aligned north-south. You look at Alcatraz Island and it's already at an odd angle. Not only that, but all the buildings on the island are at odd angles themselves. There's no grid, right? So I'm sure they do. Whoever worked on Alcatraz Island on the Build the Earth project, I'm sure they did a phenomenal job of building it in the orientation and in the location that it's supposed to be. I would like to try and make something that looks a little bit neater. So in my replica, the building locations are not 100% accurate. I'm taking some creative liberties and actually shifting things around, but for the purpose of making everything aligned to the grid,
Yeah, just making it how if Alcatraz was built in Minecraft, that's how they would do it. That's how I imagine.
If all the lines were straightened out, with the exception of like Building 64, because it's got that little bit at the end that's at an odd angle, and there's no avoiding that. But everything else, I've straightened it out a little bit just to make it a little neater. I have seen there was another person who popped up in my feed recently. He was making his own little replica, and he did a great job of capturing the angles of all the buildings. He did a really, really, really good job, and I can't praise it enough how well he did a job of that. But I could see, like, even from a distance, like the buildings they all have this very, very odd angle to them. And I look at that and I go, well, if you want to do interior detail, that doesn't really make it easy,
Yeah, I think every Minecraft player has run into the problem where they realized they can't exactly recreate their house in the game because the blocks are not a meter or the walls are not a meter thick. as they
Yeah,
are in Minecraft.
you can get pretty close though.
You can get pretty close, but
I don't know if you saw Grian's video when he was doing oh, what was it? He was trying to plan out his backyard for a project, and he built a recreation of his house, or at least the exterior of it.
oh, I think I did watch that video. I think I
Yeah,
did. Yeah.
which he upscaled it obviously, because as you said, you can't use meter thick walls to represent our walls, but you know if you make everything double or triple size or triple scale, yeah, a meter thick wall is only a third of a meter now, a little more doable.
Then you can get a little bit more realistic.
Yeah, you can get a little, which I think that's what he did. I think he upscaled everything by like a factor of 2 or 3.
So, do you have anything else you would like to add? I've actually run out of questions to ask you.
Well, just getting a little bit more specific on the tips for new Redstone or people who are wanting to get into Redstone. I know you've mentioned in this podcast before that you had expressed an interest on doing, what was it, interiors and Redstone.
So, yeah, that's if I were to perfect how I do interiors and if I were to learn how to use Redstone efficiently, I think I'd be a lot better at Minecraft.
Well, let me ask you this. I guess the first step to learning something is to figure out, what's your roadblock. So, what's your roadblock?
Well, I don't really have a project that would need to use an extensive amount of redstone. In my world that I'm working on, well, basically, I'm building a city, and every building has a farm inside. And the farms are pretty simple. Like, they're your basic, you know, farms. And it's kind of, I don't really have a reason to go outside of my comfort zone because I mean I mainly do like building stuff. It's a city, so I want to try to make it realistic. So I spend most of my time working on the creative part of that compared to the farms. So I guess that's what's holding me back.
And even, I mean, as a creative person, I would imagine even still, if you want to build anything that looks great, you want to build anything at a large scale that looks grand or something, you still have to, collect a lot of materials for that, I would imagine. Yeah.
That's a whole different thing. I spend hours and hours coming up with ideas on buildings that I can build that I think look good. The whole resource gathering thing is a whole different part of it. I do enjoy gathering stuff by hand, which a lot of Redstone people are probably gonna groan
No.
hearing that.
Yeah. No, that's the whole point of Redstone. That's what we use
Yeah.
it for. Is we look at the menial labor and we go, that's a lot of time to spend on something that
Yup.
the return on it isn't really all that worth it. So let's see if we can find a way of automating part of the process and saving some time.
Yeah.
And
That's probably the main thing because I depend on myself to gather a lot of my own resources like mining and stuff, especially stone and andesite and gravel and sand and like that stuff is like the main 4 ingredients to building a city, and I do all that by hand.
so you primarily build for the sake of making things, to express yourself creatively. And you're perfectly fine with the grind of collecting all the materials to do that. So I guess the question I have is, to what purpose do you want to learn Redstone?
Well, I would just like to be able to know where you need to use certain things. Because I see all these things. If you look up like redstone tutorials, one of the first things you're gonna see is they introduce you to certain mechanics, and I just don't know how to implement these mechanics without seeing somebody else's tutorial on a farm and then seeing that's how they do it. Like I don't know how to take it somewhere else.
Say that again. So like if you take a tutorial of somebody else's farm, you want to be able to like modify it or just adjust it to
Well,
suit your needs or
sorry if I'm explaining it bad. This is like the first time
no, it's
I've
fine.
really thought about this. But
That's fine.
okay, so okay. So if I were to see something for example, if I saw your computer or one of the computers that you've built, I'm sure you use many different mechanics inside of it, obviously. And I don't know what they do. I don't know like what does what. That's where I'm at.
Is it just a curiosity thing then? Like you'd want to acquire a little bit more understanding, a little more familiarity with the components.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, Again, I don't know if just showing you a tutorial would necessarily be helpful with that, because if you don't have, like I said, if you don't have that context to tie a concept into, then it's just abstract, and abstract ideas don't really stick all that well. So,
Mm.
but that is an interesting. I wanted to bring that up because, like I said, there's that group of people who they don't know and they don't know where to start. And so asking you that sort of thing, I would say you're probably in that category if you wouldn't say so yourself.
Yeah, I'd probably. I think I'd fit in the third category you
So
talked about.
your yeah, so your kind of insight there, it at least helps me to try and understand, like, okay, what exactly are they missing here? Because I can sit here and make tutorials till the cows come home, and you guys aren't going to learn anything because I don't know what you're missing, you know?
Yeah. And to be honest, I don't really go out of my way to look at Redstone tutorials,
Yeah.
just because to be honest, I don't really. I wouldn't use it anyway because I stick to just basic farms in the first place.
Yeah,
That's that.
you're more of a creative builder. You don't mind the grind. To you, there's no use for redstone.
Yeah, if I ever needed to dig a massive perimeter like Doc M and Hermitcraft, then yeah, I would need to learn how to use redstone to like do TNT dupers and stuff like that. But as for right now, I don't.
But even still, like, what's wrong with just following their build tutorial and then just going with it?
Well, what do you
Because
mean
they,
by that?
well, if you wanted to build a perimeter, um, Doc M, Ilmango, JL, all these guys, they have videos on how to build TNT dupers, walking machines, flying machines, all these sorts of things. I'm sure there's probably a complete tutorial on how to build a world eater sitting out there right now that you could follow along and build and get your perimeter up and being dug out right now. So what exactly is wrong with just following the tutorial and then just walking away?
Well, nothing. I don't think there's anything wrong with redstone tutorials necessarily because I think
Mhm.
it's something that you can learn from to use elsewhere. I'm kind of contradicting myself. I just realized that, but um,
I've
I
already
do
done that
have
myself.
I do have different opinions on building tutorials because I think building is something that you learn naturally. It's kind of like how you develop your own art style if you're like an artist. Like if you play Minecraft, you'll for a long time you'll develop your own building style, which I think can be altered if you watch a lot of tutorials. It kind of takes away your own touch.
You don't get a chance to kind of create your own style, your own signature, which I guess at the same time, it's like, what if your signature isn't too great? Like building, for example. I am not at all a good builder, right? I can cobble something together if given enough time and enough chances to iterate my designs. But if you've seen my Spawn Town project, I posted some updated images in the community tab. The buildings there are very bland. The only reason why they look good is because they have enough variety to keep it interesting, and it's all covered in greenery. So,
Look, the only way to get better at building is by building a lot and
yeah,
just looking at what you've done, and over time you just learn what you like and what you think looks good, and then
yeah.
you just keep adding on to it.
But that's basically what I'm saying about Redstone too. You basically just have to do a lot of projects, build a lot, and eventually you kind of get that intuition. So, why is it difficult for you to do Redstone and it's difficult for me to do building when all we have to do is just build?
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know.
I haven't put the time in. That's really what it comes down to,
Yeah.
personally.
Maybe it's also because I haven't put the time into building myself. Again, I can do things if I really need to, but I'm not very good at it. I'm very slow. Which maybe then that might very well be the answer. Um, is to just take it slow, to just kind of do something incremental, which in the context of building things, that makes sense. You can add on to a building very easily. You can change a building very easily. The buildings I have in Spawn Town are very bland, but I know that at any point in the future I can come in with more blocks and add more detail, add a little bit of variety, change it up, do this, that, and the other. I don't think you can do the same thing with Redstone. I don't think there's that opportunity to just do something basic and then iterate on it later. Is there?
Unless they add new mechanics and new blocks.
Maybe. I don't know. That might actually just add more to the list of things you need to learn, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Well, I really don't have anything else to add. I had a great time. This was very interesting talking to somebody that knows more about this subject than I do.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to be watching this one again because I want to try and hear what you say about your experience with learning Redstone, because honestly, that sort of insight is actually really useful. And if I ever decide to try and make better Redstone tutorials in the future, it'll more than likely come in handy.
Well, I'll try to spend the next couple of years figuring out what I need to know, and maybe I'll look back on this podcast and cringe a lot because of
Yeah.
how bad I'm explaining things. But thank you for coming on. This was actually a lot of fun for me. So
Yeah,
I hope you
thanks
had a
for
good
having me.
time.
I did.
Again, this is Noobasaurus on YouTube and also Twitter as well, I believe, or
It's
X.
more or less. I haven't used Twitter in a long time.
Yeah, I get that. Do you have anybody you'd like to shout out or?
I guess, yeah, obviously Ed, because he was the one who suggested the whole Deep Thought project. He's definitely a lot of fun to have. I met him through that whole project, and he's been a close friend ever since. So, hi Ed, eDragon13.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to another episode of Around the Block. I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.